Welcome to the podcast, Your Soul Path. In this series, Thomas Bormann and I are going to be talking about the moon in your birth chart. In order to know the self, it is absolutely essential to understand your moon placement. Most of you are probably familiar with your sun sign, but the moon is a powerful force. So it's just as important to understand your moon sign as it is to understand your sun sign, because not only does the moon show us where we find our emotional security, but it also teaches us about what makes us feel safe and how we might connect more deeply to our intuition. I'm excited about this journey. Again, I've got Thomas with me. Thomas, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Khadijah. Well, as you said, I'm Thomas, and I work as a mindfulness trainer and conscious life coach. And I see myself as a companion for people on their path to a more authentic and honest inner life, full of creativity and inner abundance. And that is connected with their intuition, because intuition is life. So, and as we are talking about the moon, Khadijah, my moon sits in Sagittarius. And I can say about myself that for a long time, I was searching for new activities, new ideas, and views to see the world, and never get really to the point that I found it. There was always a longing remaining. And over time, that longing led me into my inner world. So I became aware of my honest feelings and emotions, and that I have an inner sensitive part. And that helped me to get into this state of feeling purpose, sense, and arriving, being just as I am. And meanwhile, I share my way to that life, which is based on intuition and consciousness, also with other people, and accompany them on their path and journey.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. I'm looking forward to accompanying our listeners on this particular journey that has to do with the moon. I think it's very interesting that we both come from different schools of astrology, so we'll both be able to bring in different perspectives of what the moon means in the birth chart. So for those of you who aren't familiar, I just want to introduce myself quickly. My name is Khadijah, owner and founder of Eat Your Moon. It is my mission to help people to know themselves on the deepest level in order to foster more self-love, happiness, prosperity, and self-trust. And so I act basically as a spiritual companion using my gifts in astrology, spiritual coaching, numerology, and Reiki. My moon is in Gemini, and I have to say, since I was a child, I always had a very special relationship with words. And I know Gemini is very deeply connected to consciousness, which is also connected to words and to expression. I also have other placements in Gemini, so I'm not surprised that I'm here talking to you today using words to connect with you all on a much deeper level. So, Thomas, what I think is interesting is that we both have our moons in signs that are across from each other. The polarity of Gemini is Sagittarius. We're on the same axis. Both have to do with seeking knowledge and sharing knowledge. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun. And I know it's our goal to make it very useful and very informative for our listeners. So if you guys want to know where your moon is, you can put into the search engine moon sign as well as your birth date, because the moon is one of those placements where it's not necessary to have the birth time. As long as the moon's not necessarily on the cusp between two different signs, then the birth time is definitely useful. But usually with just a quick search with moon sign and your birth date, you can find out in what sign your moon was in at the time of your birth. So Thomas, why don't I just explain quickly what the birth chart is, and then we can slowly move into how this series is set up.
Absolutely, Khadijah. That makes sense, yeah.
So the birth chart basically is a picture of the sky at the time of your birth. We take the birth date, birth time, and birthplace, put it in, and we're given a map of the sky at the time of your birth. We can see where Jupiter was, where Saturn was, the sun, all at the time of your birth, giving us an idea of what your soul wants to achieve in this particular lifetime. Now, the birth chart shows potential. You cannot look at a birth chart and assume you know who someone is. It's important to understand that we all have free will and we all have the opportunity to exercise the power of choice. So what crystallizes in the end is always a result of our choices as opposed to what is in this birth chart. However, it is a wonderful and helpful, almost like manual in helping us understand why are certain things a certain way in our lives and how can we utilize this information and this power to live the best lives that we can possibly live. Now, when astrologers read the birth chart, we don't just look at the sun sign. We look at all of the placements of who someone is or how they express themselves in a general sense. In that case, we look at the ascendant. So the sign that the ascendant is in, we look at the sun sign and the moon sign. It's a combination of these three before we move on to looking at the rest of the planets and placements. Thomas, do you want to give us an idea of the ascendant and the sun before we move on to our star of the show, the moon?
Sure, Khadijah. So as you rightly said, we look at both. And I would like to start with the ascendant, which is actually the sign at the eastern horizon at your time of birth and date of birth. And what does that tell us? So that is basically how you show up to this world. So it's your primal instinct, how you perceive the world and how you feel in this world, and what basic potential, so to say, you bring with you. So which then shows up as a personality trait or your inclinations or talents even. And so basically one can say it tells you who you are. And as we are here on this earth planet to live our life and to live this life including experiences of any kind. So there is a certain path our soul wants to go, during our life. Mm-hmm. And looking at the sun sign allows us a bit to understand the direction of this whole development, because the sun sign, which is, so to say, the most important principle, because the sun is radiating, and giving the light. So the question is, what allows you to shine in this life here on earth with your inner light? So actually energetically, how you best integrate and how you best can, so to say, radiate here in life. And so that translates a bit in some experiences your soul wants to make during this life journey, and we can interpret these experiences out of the position of the sun at the date of your birth. And of course, these two players get an important third one. Khadijah, as you mentioned, that is the moon. And maybe you elaborate a bit on why the moon is so important in this big three package.
Well, I really appreciate the moon. When I first began my astrology journey and began to understand where my moon was located and what that meant, I had so much of a stronger understanding of who I was. And I felt a great burst of self-confidence because it helped me to really understand why I even had certain habits in connection to processing and experiencing my emotions. So the moon, as we know, is connected to cycles. It's connected to ebb and to flow. What I think is interesting is it takes the moon about 27 to 28 days to completely travel through the zodiac. And it's only in one sign for about 2 to 3 days. So this is a very fast moving planet in comparison to Pluto, which takes 14 to 30 years to move through a particular sign. So even if you're born in the same generation as someone, or even within a few days of someone, you're likely to have a different moon sign than the person next to you, which basically means you're likely to process your emotions and find your emotional security in a different way than others are. So the moon is very helpful in helping us to foster more self-understanding, as well as more understanding for the people that we work with, the people we love, the people we generally come into contact with. Now, if you're looking for the moon in your birth chart, then it's going to have the symbol of the crescent moon. So if you find the crescent moon that's outlined, then you found your moon in your birth chart, or you can look at the bottom of the chart and there's a legend which has each symbol and each planet that can also assist you in finding your moon in the birth chart. Now, Thomas, you come from a different school of astrology than I do. Is it also the same for you all, that you understand the moon to be an opportunity to understand how one grounds emotionally within the self? Is it also a symbol of the unconscious for you as well?
Yeah, I agree with you, Khadijah, and with all what you mentioned before. So I think we are not far away here. So I would only add that the moon, so to say, describes our inner part and also describes how secure or isolated you might feel or perceive yourself in this world. And also the moon actually reflects the mother. Yeah, your mother or one's mother. And with that comes that we can also derive some information about how you grew up, in which mood the family was, what was the situation, and how that actually shaped a bit who you are now and how you're feeling and how you feel and perceive the world. Yeah. So no, very much with you, Khadijah. And if you want, I think you can also check for yourself where the moon is positioned, and then you can share it in the comments below. No, would
Yes,
be
please do
interesting for
share.
us to learn.
Yeah, put an emoji or, let us know where's your moon in the birth chart. We'd be so interested to know. Again, as you said, Thomas, the moon is really an opportunity to understand the self, its reflection. It's also our nurturing in childhood. So it's a very important sign to understand. And if we share, as you encourage us to do in the comments, it's also an opportunity to help us understand each other, to help us understand how we perceive and also feel differently than others, which also, again, really supports the energy of community. So what we thought we would do in this particular cycle is to organize the upcoming episodes according to the elements. Each sign is connected to one of the 4 elements: fire, earth, air, and water. And so we want to handle in the next episode the fire moons. In episode 3, we want to handle the earth moons. Episode 4, we want to handle the air moons. And in episode 5, the water moons. Before we move on, we just want to touch on a few of the qualities associated with these elements. Thomas, what's your connection to fire? You are a fire moon, so tell us, what do you associate with this energy?
Well, so basically coming from a nature perspective, I would associate with fire the light, that it brings to us here, and the warmth that is associated with it. So actually, fire can bring life, or can allow beings to develop and supports it. On the other hand, fire also has in nature, we all have seen the great fires, maybe in the woods that every year are in regions where it's very hot temperatures, and then we see the destructive element this energy has, because it's burning down wood or anything that is in their way. And so it can have both qualities, and that for me is very much speaking, also if we then look at kind of the philosophical explanation of the fire energy. So there is this huge creative energy part, and that comes with a strong energy, I would say enthusiasm. And there is also the opposite, the kind of destroying energy that could translate in conflicts, in confrontation, and so on. So I think these are the most dominant qualities that I see. So it depends, as always, Khadijah, on how we balance, certain qualities in our life.
Yeah, and I like that image of, fire. The forest fires, for example, they have the potential to destroy, but they also have this potential for cleansing. So sometimes these fires are actually necessary to cleanse away what's no longer serving the forest, particularly the forest floor. And then it opens up space for new life. So even the fiery and so-called destructive element of fire can be very useful. And if we can understand this in connection to the moon, then we can really unlock opportunities to understand each other, as well as really to understand the self. So if you have your moon in Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, you definitely want to check out episode 2. Now we move into the earth element. It's one of my favorite elements because it's the tangible element of the four. It's something you can really hold in your hand. And I think that's a great description for this particular element because it has to do with foundation, reliability, tangibility. It's resources. It's its own kind of sufficiency and stability from the philosophical aspect. So do you want to tell us more, Thomas, about the earth energy, but more from the nature aspect?
Well, so the earth energy, I mean, it is strongly related to nature, to the growth and development, and it reflects then also a love to nature, for nature, yeah, and for all what we can find out there. And it has a certain cycle, nature has its cycle through the year, and it has an element of growing and resting and growing again. So it's really a constant quality, so to say, yeah? And it's adaptable, according to the seasons. So it has this permanent quality in it. And I would say that the most important fact we can learn out of comparing that to nature is this love to nature, love to living things, because that is what makes life. Yeah. And would you like then to reflect a bit on the more philosophical view on that, Khadijah?
Yeah, it's definitely connected to the energy of foundation, stability, resources. We've got signs here that have a lot to do with finding firm footing in some of the most difficult and very narrow spaces. If you look at the animal aspects that are connected to the earth signs, we've got Taurus, the bull, we've got Capricorn, the goat. These are two very stable animals, the bull with its girth and Capricorn, the goat, with its ability to balance in the most steep or narrow spaces. So it's definitely, again, this energy of foundation, this energy of stability. And like you said, it's also connected to nourishment and a love of nature, which is also reflected in the sign of Virgo. So if you have your sign, your moon sign in Taurus, Virgo, or Capricorn, you're definitely going to want to check out episode 3. So now we move on to the air element, also a very special element when talking about processing emotions. One of the things I like particularly about the element of air in connection to processing one's emotions is, air is connected to the energy of intellect. If we look at it philosophically, a lot is happening in the mind. When I found that out in connection to my Gemini moon, I really appreciated this connection to intellect. I used to look at pictures and just write all over them because, air is very connected to thinking and to speaking. But Thomas, do you want to tell us a little bit about how this element connects in the nature sense?
Sure, Khadijah. Air is also an important element in nature. So we can observe air everywhere. It finds its way. It does not really take on a shape unless you bring it into a certain direction. So it's permeable. It's also not really resistant. Yeah. And it can develop a huge force. Yeah. So it can be a breeze and it's a more windy quality, and that go up to a real storm. And we all know and have these pictures in mind what this storm can create or destroy. Yeah. So the air is kind of an elastic element that finds its way. I mentioned it through other elements and moves in any direction. And that, I think, quite nicely correlates with philosophical view that you already described, yeah, and illustrates why air represents, so to say, the knowledge, the intellect, and also the processing of emotions. And yeah, if you have your moon in one of the following signs, then you definitely want to check out the episode number 4, which focuses on air. So these signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius.
Yes. And now we come to the last element. What's important to understand is that not just the signs, but also the planets are connected to elements, and the moon is connected to the element of water. So as we come to the water signs, it's basically as if the element of water shows up twice, how the moon expresses itself in these signs, because the moon itself is water, and then it's also in water signs. And water, as we know, is very deeply connected to the emotions, but also connected to our intuition. It's connected to flow and the currents that move through us. It's cycles, it's tides, the ebb and the flow, the rise and the fall. Water is also a very life-giving force. Without it, we cannot subsist. Without it, we cannot survive. So as we talk about the moon in these water signs, we're also talking about intuition. We're talking about flexibility and the ability to move with the cycles and the tides.
Yeah, Khadijah. And think about water, how we find it. Where do we find it in nature? So the water is, as you said, a life-giving quality and energy, and it could come in the form of a river, and a small river or a large one. But it can also come as a sea with a very deep, which is very deep. And that, for me, exactly shows also how our feelings, our inner self, is built. This is a very deep sea, and we do not really know much about this deep sea, and it's still not fully scientifically, so to say, discovered. And a bit that is also the same situation within ourself and our emotions. So that's why the moon in a water sign, so to say, multiplies this quality, and we are able to dig even more deeper, so to say, into the sea of emotion, feelings, perceptions. And another quality that I also consider important is that water has this cleansing quality. Wherever we want to clean something, and then we use water, and it has this effect. And this, so to say, is also a nice picture for the quality of the moon in a water sign. And what are the water signs? So if you have your moon in Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces, then you definitely would like to check out episode 5, where we then dig deeper in the 3 elements and the qualities of the moon.
Yeah, so thank you, Thomas, for joining me in this very first introductory episode. And I'm excited to move on to the remaining episodes and really dig deep with regards to the moons. So we're looking forward to you all meeting us in those episodes, and also sharing your experience of what it is to have your particular moon sign. We hope you'll also give us the opportunity to experience what it's like for you to live with your particular moon.
Absolutely, Khadijah. I also look forward to our dialogue on the different positions of the moon through the zodiac signs. Let's talk to you soon.
So just check the description below, and you'll find the links to the upcoming episodes, as well as links to other videos that might be helpful to you in understanding your birth chart more deeply.
Thank you, Khadijah.
Thank you, Thomas.
Next time was really fun, and looking forward to our next episode.
See you in episode 2.